Tunisia, the country often touted as the success story of the Arab Spring movement, is now in the midst of what critics are calling a coup, with the president declaring a month-long curfew and just hours ago banning public gatherings. Last night, President Kais Saied invoked the constitution, firing the nation's prime minister, freezing powers of parliament, and taking control of all armed forces following a wave of protests earlier that day. Now, Sunday's demonstrations were in fact sparked by frustrations over a growing economic crisis and rising COVID cases, with protesters actually demanding the resignation of the prime minister and the dissolution of parliament. The president's declaration later that night was celebrated in the streets by many of the Tunisian people, but it was called a coup by a leading opposition party and its supporters. Joining me now is Francesca Ebel, a journalist based in Tunisia. Francesca, it's good to have you with us on the ground there. What is the feeling in Tunisia right now about the president's decision and now this curfew? Do we have any idea if it has broad support?
Well, the scenes last night were telling in the fact that there were scenes of immense jubilation. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people on the streets of Tunis and other cities across Tunisia. It's clear that the president has wide public support. However, the party that much of this blame is directed at, the moderate Islamist party in Tunisia, they also have a massive support base. So at the moment, earlier today, I was outside Parliament and I talked with protesters from both sides of the political divide, and they were in equal number. There were hundreds of protesters from both sides today outside Parliament. So as of yet, it's unclear who will gain the upper hand in this political crisis.
Yeah, we often think of Tunisia as being the birthplace of the Arab Spring, obviously, for what it brought through across the region 10 years ago. What does this all mean for Tunisia's nascent democracy and its effort to stabilize its democratic institutions and processes?
That's a good question. I would say it's too early to tell. Today didn't really yield much in terms of developments. It's not really sure yet what the new government will look like. The president hasn't yet announced his choice of prime minister, for example. However, I've been speaking to several constitutional lawyers here in Tunisia, and they are concerned that the way that this Article 80 was invoked is questionable. The way that it's worded in the Tunisian constitution is very open-ended. It's very vague. And they are concerned that President Kais Saied didn't follow some of the rules that are in place within the Constitution for this article.
Let me just ask you really quickly, if I can, with a few seconds that we have left, just what was at the core that was fueling these protests? I mean, was it economic grievances or the increase in COVID cases and the handling of it?
It's a culmination of months of discontent. There were protests that began in January and also continued in June. It's definitely to do with the economic crisis that Tunisia has been experiencing for several years now. But there was also a lot of frustration at the political deadlock, this dispute that has been in place between President Kais Saied and Prime Minister Hisham Mashishi for months now. It's also the deteriorating health crisis. The infection rate in Tunisia has skyrocketed in recent months. It experienced some of the highest mortality rates in the region. But also police brutality was an important element in the midst of this protest. The protests over the last year have been very shaped by immense police brutality.
All right, Francesca Ebel, live in Tunisia for us this evening. Thank you for that update.